Welcome to Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. I'm here today with David Marshall. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, James, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And let's go ahead and just go over your background a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I'm David Marshall. Currently, I'm the senior manager of talent acquisition with a company called Medalogix. So my background, I've been in talent acquisition since 2010. Let's see, I started off, I didn't have an internship when I graduated from college, so I consider my start an internship. So I was actually an HR file clerk. So just pushing all these papers, hard copies of everything to just a digital format. So slowly got into recruiting, I think in 2011. And from there, it's been uphill from a talent acquisition standpoint. So corporate recruiter has been the majority of my my focus. And so I actually transitioned to more so of the SaaS kind of provider space actually in 2020. So from then until now, SaaS companies is what I've been a part of.
For sure. And so the current company you're part of is Medalogix. Did I say that right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Medalogix. So yeah, based in Nashville, Tennessee. It is a SaaS company.
Nice.
And basically from a high level, data analytics. We provide data analytics to clinicians so that way they can in turn provide better quality of care to their patients that they're serving and stuff. And so based in Nashville, company size, roughly about 70 people.
Cool.
We have 17 states represented. So even though the company is small, very big presence. So certainly excited about that.
Okay, cool. And I think I saw somewhere on LinkedIn, did y'all get acquired by private equity or?
Private, yeah. So
Okay.
Private equity. So like I said, so still kind of in the I would say startup phase more so, but really kind of more so mature where we are like high growth right now. So
Sure.
That's one of the reasons why they brought in a big hitter like me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, of course.
No, but that's one of the reasons why the company actually sought my skill set out. It's because we are in growth mode right now. So QA engineers, software engineers, come on down. So but yeah, awesome. But really excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you had asked just like for me to share a little bit about my background, so
yeah.
I guess where I'm coming from too. But yeah, so I'm the CEO of Secure Vision. I've been doing that for 7 years, and we've worked with over 150 tech companies to help them hire. We have a RPO model, which is like, as I like to say, just a fancy way of saying you can borrow recruiters from us.
Yeah.
So we have recruiters that basically operate like internal recruiters for as long as a company needs them. It's like a subscription. And then when they don't need the internal recruiter anymore, they can give 30 days notice and we'll reassign that recruiter. So it's kind of like it fits between like contingent recruitment and internal. And our value adds are basically higher quality than contingent, more flexibility than internal. And that's kind of the value proposition. But yeah, anyways, a lot of startups, growth stage companies, hyper growth companies, VC backed, PE backed, it's kind of our wheelhouse. And then I've like, in the earlier days, I built myself out. So I did like talent leadership roles at different companies. So yeah, man, that's kind of the world that I play in. So I know there's going to be a lot of shared experiences here.
Oh yeah.
And we're going to have some good conversations. So just to jump in like to the first topic, we wanted to talk a little bit about executive leadership buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Like I agree with you. I actually literally this morning posted about this on LinkedIn, just talking about how important it is for I think it was this morning, sometime really soon. I'm doing posts like twice a day, so I get like lost in terms of like when I post stuff, but like basically talking about how important it is to get buy-in from the leadership team. And that's like, it's such an important topic, and it's such an important thing for companies to do, because like talent acquisition leaders, like we can't control if a function leader is following our process, our best practices. And so you need buy-in from all the different leaders, and that comes from directly from the C-level that needs to set a culture around like talent acquisition being a like performance metrics company wide, not just falling within talent. That would, it'd be like blaming the sales team if they're not selling, but there's not product market fit, or like, like or vice versa, right? You're coming down hard on a product team when your revenue org is totally out of whack. Like your company needs to be aligned on objectives, and everybody's job is obviously correlated to some degree. And we see that a lot in talent acquisition. So But anyways, I just want to get your thoughts here. Like, what does kind of executive leadership buy-in mean to you? Like, what are the biggest challenges you see out there right now when it comes to that topic?
Yeah, well, those are great questions, and I can't tell you how refreshing it is to really talk about this. So I'm going to answer your question and then kind of go into everything else. So, what executive leadership buy-in really means to me, it's really just having alignment from a vision standpoint, meaning that I can see from their lens and they can see from my lens, vice versa. So when decisions are being made, when I hear their thoughts, I'm not hearing it from an HR mindset perspective. It's okay, I can elevate kind of my vision, so to speak, to be able to really align with what they're doing. And then I can bring it back down to my level to say, all right, now how do we digest this in a way that's appropriate and filter that through the TA lens so that way it can be in alignment with what's happening. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. I definitely agree on the alignment, but I like to go as far as to say, like, I want every leader within the company to have like a performance metric around hiring for their team.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's not, even more than alignment, it's like, it's I just think that that's an incredibly important part of it, because you can't just like have talent acquisition again like accountable for a perform like an outcome, a hiring goal. But then if you have a hiring manager that's like missing interviews every week,
Right.
even if like you're aligned on the role description or whatever else, like it needs to be a priority, and that starts at the top. And the way that you make it show the company that it's a priority is putting a performance metric around it, right? Like, hey, this is one of the three performance metrics, or one of the few performance metrics that every VP has for their department. I feel like is um it's really the best way to move, like, to make progress when it comes to buy-in.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that I have been looking to initiate in my current role now. Because I'll say that, it's very unique how can I say this? It just with just the need for TA. And then oftentimes, as I'm sure we kind of get boxed into this transactional, like, hey, you're doing this, you're doing that, to obviously bring talent in. But I look at it like, I don't know if you're a fan of college football, but like, I am too as well. So of course, the state I'm from, Alabama, that kind of lets what team I typically root for. And so it's one thing to really attract and actually have 5 stars on your team. So what are you going to do to make sure that they maintain that star status? And so I think when we talk about alignment, when we talk about performance metrics, that's really the meat and potatoes that I'm very involved in, that I like to be involved in as such, and making sure that I'm not only positioning the candidate, but also the hiring manager on up to ensure that we are creating an environment where they can succeed and obviously help them obviously advance in the company, but also vice versa. We're giving them the tools to be able to be successful. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've come into environments before where we built out like process docs and all this stuff, and it's like it's all great as long as, but if like people aren't following it, it's like what can you really do? I mean, and it's always like you have to be tactful, right? Like,
yes,
you don't want to create enemies.
indeed.
And that's right. And that's why you want like a CEO to
Yeah.
be the one like communicating this, right? You don't, I mean, ideally, like, or if you do go to like executive leadership, hopefully they're the type that's not gonna like say like, hey, head of talent was coming to me with this complaint for how you're operating your department. Like, hopefully they can be a little bit more tactful and just say like, hey, what are the hiring outcomes that you have? Okay, well, what can we put into place in order to make sure that that happens? Are we following the process? Hey, let's put in a goal for you this quarter. I want to see you do XYZ, right?
Right. And yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it.
No, I was saying, but that's really important, and I think that that's one of the things that in kind of going back to alignment, having those conversations and having a pulse. And I'll say, from the first time I started recruiting to where I am now, I am much different. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I got into recruiting. It kind of fell into my lap. I didn't really say, oh, I want to do this. It was kind of like, oh, okay, this is the next.
Does anybody plan to be a recruiter?
And I made a tweet the other day. I said, if you are nobody, if you want to do this job well, you really don't want to do this job, because when I say it has, it really has, and it's not all the time internal. It's oftentimes the circumstances that you kind of have to deal with, because again, like, trying to just, you understand it and you see it. So getting people to really understand and see it. So just kind of knowing how to have conversations with different people. And so really what I like to do is really, it starts with just expectations. You know, when I have those conversations with the CEO, I'm like, okay, I'm here. You know, this is your idea. Break that down for me. And I try to get them to talk. It's like, okay, if you were presenting to the board, talk to me in that same manner. Have all your reports, have all your, you know, your metrics and different things, your vision for the next 3 to 5 years. What is it that you want me to accomplish? Because I think that that's, you know, having a solid foundation is certainly key to being able to execute that. And then obviously taking that, and then again, bite-sized material, having those weekly, those monthly follow-ups with those who are, you know, I'm gonna say foot soldiers, but those who are kind of carrying out the vision, so to speak, from that mid-level, you know, senior level leadership, and being able to just really break that down to where, you know, I'm constantly having a pulse. So kind of going back when I first started, it was kind of like, hey, I'm calling people, I'm talking to people in this. I didn't really think about candidate experience. I didn't think about, you know, again, like, you know, keeping hiring managers, keeping their foot to the fire and stuff. And so now you reach a point to where, you know, you being proactive, setting up those standards and such. And I think a lot of times, you know, the difficulty is because, you know, if you work in finance, if you work in IT, if you work in all these other areas of the company, there's this, you know, really big eye on ROI. So you can see it, because if they do this, clearly it impacts the product. And so TA obviously impacts a lot of the if not all the organization, but it's certainly hard to define that. And because we're not necessarily creating or being a part of, you know, product production, so to speak. And so I think it's very unique when you talk about being tactful to say, okay, how can I ensure that I'm communicating in a way to where you see that what I am doing really does impact the product itself and the people itself? Because again, if you don't have the right people in place, then certainly it's going to hurt everything that we're doing.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to produce the best product.
Yeah.
Or you know, sell it, or
Yeah.
I mean, the whole, like, it impacts everything, and it's very obvious to us, I think. But I think sometimes it's weird. It's like people don't want to invest. A lot of companies, they may not want to invest enough in talent acquisition, but then, you know, they're not, you know, happy with necessarily the outcomes, and it's they look at talent as like a cost center versus. And I sometimes use that terminology when I talk about talent, but more so because it's like commonly accepted as like that's what, you know, how CFOs and a lot of people are looking at it. But the reality is that it's you know, when you get that right, it enables you to grow a lot faster. So you know, that's something I'm constantly talking about.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think it's like and I'm okay with education and talking tactfully and like doing things to get that buy-in. I think that's part of what makes a good leader is being able to communicate why like this bit like this is so interconnected with the mission and the outcomes that the company wants to accomplish. But again, I think the way to do it is going straight to the top. It's like, opposed to trying to have these conversations with you know, VPs and directors, I like to more specifically just go straight to the top. And, you know, maybe even just asking like the C-level, if the CEO, COO, like, hey, like, I think we should be tactful in how we express this, opposed to express the dissatisfaction coming from me. Let's just instead put in some kind of performance metric, which I think is going to enable us to get the results that you want to see from us and talent. And do that. The one thing that I would say, though, is I have been in environments where it's like every month trying to convince the team to get buy-in, and it's like you're telling executives what need to happen, and then they're just constantly fighting it. And that's a real pain in the ass. And so, like, what I always recommend is, like, it's okay to do the education, but if you find yourself in a position fighting for resources and to explain why doing something a certain way is important, then I always recommend it's probably worthwhile to leave the company if you can, and to find a leadership team that's aligned with you philosophically on talent acquisition, because it's just a waste of resources and time to constantly be like holding your ground, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been in that type of position at any previous employer, but it's a real pain in the ass.
No, you're absolutely right. It is a huge pain, and I'll be how can I say this? I've you know, with the permission of leadership, leadership meaning my chief people officer, chief HR officer, I've let people kind of, hit their butt on the pavement a little bit at times. Cause I say, okay, here it is. I'm coaching. I have the metrics. I have all these different things and such. And it's such a fight as I'm sure you're aware, as you just mentioned. So instead of just, constantly kicking and saying my vision versus your vision, my way versus your way, I said, okay, we're going to invest in your way. We're going to invest in your way holistically. We're going to do this your way. And I know it's not going to work, but I can't convince you of that. I can't convince you of that, but I know experience can. So once we have that experience and, all that stuff, that everything we thought we had going on and it all comes crumbling down, they kind of come back and be like, hey, David, kind of need your help. I said, okay, are you ready to listen? Because it's not my show, it's our show. But again, I'm only here just to give you tools and resources to help you to kind of, align the ship. We obviously, we both want the same thing. We want great talent that's going to be here, that's going to stay here. We want to nurture them and obviously help them grow and such. But again, the way we go about doing that, I typically, not saying that I have, the best vision for that, but I know collectively we can come up with something that certainly satisfies our needs and such. So, I'll be remiss if I didn't say I've let a, person kind of, or hiring manager kind of bump their head a little bit to say, all right.
I think so. As long as it doesn't blow back on you, right? Like,
no.
Yeah.
Listen, I documentation, I have.
Yes, that's exactly. See, that's what it comes down to. It's like, if you have a hiring manager that is rescheduling a lot, document. You need to have like a Google Doc where you're recording that stuff. If you're seeing conversion rates slip or top loss reasons being because of candidate experience, you need to record all of that stuff so that when hiring isn't going to plan, like you can show like, this isn't on me. Like, we have made several recommendations on X, Y, and Z dates. Here are all the times that we've had, our syncs rescheduled, our interviews rescheduled. I mean, we have, even though we're more on the agency side, we have very similar situations, right? So we do a lot of VC partnerships. So venture capital firms will introduce us to portfolio companies so that we can provide recruiting support to those portcos. And the issue is that a lot of times portfolio companies, they're only going to make noise if they're not happy about something, right? And so like, we had a recent situation in which we had like an early stage company that was like missing interviews every single week, reach out to the VC partner and say like, Secure Vision's not getting it done. And we're like looking at the data. It's like, you missed interviews with one candidate so many times they dropped out of the process.
Yeah.
Like you're missing our weekly calls. And these guys came from big tech. So they came from like, a big tech company, and they had started, they're at a startup, like a 10-person, 15-person startup. And it's like, there was also this expectation, like, oh, it was pretty easy for me to recruit at Netflix. How could it be that much different? Right. And it's like, they didn't make the connection. Like, well, nobody actually knows your little startup.
Right.
It's a totally different motion. You can't compete on pay. You can't compete on brand.
Yeah.
Like, you need to find people with that startup kind of passion, but it's going to be a lot harder. So I think it's just a combination of things. But again, like a lot of the times hiring managers, department leaders, they're only loud when something isn't going well. And so when you're in talent acquisition, you need to document that stuff because, they had reached out to the VC and gave that feedback. And so we had to reach out to the VC and say, well, actually, here's what's going on. Right. Here's why that's happening. Right. Because, and you can't do that without having the right data and documentation. So I just wanted to expand on that point because I agree with you. It's important to do that.
Absolutely. Documentation is key. And again, it just really just creates an easier process and such when it comes down to that. And I mean, I kind of want to revisit something you said earlier. You keep talking about these performance metrics, and I think that is such an important thing. And that's, I can't tell you how many times I've been in conferences and all this and all of these gurus, no slack to anybody, but it's like everybody's always talking at a high level. So I want to kind of dive into the meat and potatoes, like a little bit of what you said. So do you have maybe 3 to 5 bullet points, if that many, when we talk about performance metrics and such, for internal leadership? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think like when we're dialing in internally to talent acquisition, we can track a lot more. Like we can track time to coverage. How long does it take for us to get to a full slate of candidates? We can track diversity, right? In terms of diverse candidates, how many have been considered for the role, right? We can track all of that stuff. We can get a lot more in depth. But when it comes to other department heads, like just keeping it simple, right? Like, okay, what's your hiring goal for the quarter?
Yeah.
All right, you got to hire 10 people. How close to goal are you? Right. And if you're not close to goal, then that's a knock on your performance. That's a knock on potentially your bonus. I mean,
Mhm.
okay, well, how can you improve? Like it's when the performance isn't going well, what they're gonna do most of the time is say like, well, I'm talk with David and talent, or talk with James and talent, right? Like they're gonna point to us, but then the question just becomes like, are we following the process? And that conversation has to come from the leader, not from talent acquisition, because we're
Yes.
not managing that person directly. This is a performance-based conversation. And our job is not to have performance-based conversations. We can give suggestions, but I'm not going to go to a VP of customer success or like a VP of engineering and, and tell them like, hey, you need to do XYZ, your job XYZ way. So I think it just comes down to like being able to show the data, the documentation, and that conversation to be had directly between the hiring manager and their leader.
Yeah.
And I think it goes all the way up to a VP level. So I think managers should be held accountable. I think directors, VPs ultimately need to be accountable for place hires within their department.
Right.
And they honestly, to some extent, they should be accountable for the quality of the talent. Like if their department has high turnover, or they have a lot of people on the team that aren't producing great outcomes, like how clear are the performance metrics around that position? Like, have we been able to develop very clear performance expectations for a role? If not, why? And if so, how is the team performing? And if a team has like several members of the team that are not performing to very clearly outlined performance metrics, like that comes back on the hiring manager or the VP too. I mean,
Right.
not every hiring manager, like manager level, is going to have experience hiring. But if you get to a
Absolutely.
VP level, you better have a lot of experience hiring at that point. Like I think again, like when
Right.
you're looking to fill those functions, nobody should be a VP of engineering or sales if they haven't scaled a team. Like they needed to be in a management role or a director level role where they're hired before, because one of the recommendations I make too, it's like if you don't have experience hiring, like you don't hire somebody who doesn't have experience hiring at like a VP
Right.
level. Like that's a huge red flag. And I mean, so yeah, that's basically how I think about it. Put a hiring quota in place, have it roll up all the way to the VP level, and only hire VPs that have scaled teams before.
You know what's funny? I'll even take it one, do one better, because this is something I actually started that I've never done before in any of my history. When I say it has made my life easier. So keep in mind, we're a tech company.
For sure.
Every 2 weeks, we have and literally I was talking with our CIO when I first kind of got started and just introducing myself, and he was part of my interview process. Great guy. And so I'll never forget, he was having he mentioned we were having a conversation. He's like, "Oh, I got to go. We got our IT leadership meeting, in a matter of minutes and stuff." And so I was like, "Huh." So I let him go, and I just thought about it. I was like, "Well, I would really love to be in that meeting." And so lo and behold, I asked him after he got done. I was like, "Look, going forward, I just want to be a fly on the wall. I'm not trying to talk. I'm not trying to do anything. I just want to learn really what it is that you're doing, and just learn just kind of from what you're telling your leaders, how your leaders are integrating and operating with you." So all that to say, now we have, not only do we have our tech leadership meetings every 2 weeks, I'm actually a part of that meeting. So literally we spend the first 15 minutes talking about talent acquisition, recruiting, what's going on, alignments and stuff like that there. So having that presence of the CIO as well as the department heads, it's money. It's money.
Yeah.
Because I have everybody, in one room, in one location. I can talk about, just really quick high level stuff, what's going on, our successes, our areas of opportunities for the week, and really what's going on. So it really just creates a warmer process. So those managers, not saying that anybody's slipping, but, those managers who maybe are struggling a little bit more, they have an opportunity to really be around their peers, but okay, this is what he did to help me, or this is what I did. So it's kind of like, an organic, they're coaching each other. They're hearing each other's success stories. They're having that opportunity to talk amongst themselves. So it creates, and these people are pretty competitive. So it just creates that high level of just everybody wanting to do it the right way, being accountable. And obviously you're in front of the CIO, so
Yeah, it's like it's social accountability, right? Like if we know there's gonna
yeah.
be like our peers are gonna be on a call, like we don't want to look like we're if we're
Right.
not performing, like
No.
that's just awkward.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I think so. I mean, that's a really smart idea. And
Mhm.
so we earlier on the show, like in one of the first episodes, like one of my friends is the chief HR officer, or was the first chief HR officer of LinkedIn.
Oh wow.
His
Okay.
name's Steve Cadigan. I would definitely, if you haven't already, definitely follow him on LinkedIn. He's a great
Yeah.
guy. He's got a lot of great insights.
Will
Um,
do.
but yeah, so like one of the things that he mentioned is that at each leadership meeting, it didn't matter like what function it was or whatever at LinkedIn, the first thing they talked about is, are we building a great team? And if other stuff got pushed, then it got pushed. But they always talked about how's the team performing? How's talent acquisition going? I mean, he helped scale LinkedIn from 300 to 3,000. So it's
Right.
like that was like one of the things that he said, okay, this is the first thing that we're going to talk about at every leadership meeting. So again, it's just like if it's a priority, right? That should be something. And again, it's like, yeah, there's two ways to approach it. There's like
Yeah.
the way that you mentioned where it's like, hey, I'm going to be on these calls. This is what we're going to do. If you're in an organization where that's not enough, then it's like getting that performance metric in place, because people will shape up and make it happen. If they're not going to do it, if they don't have the kind of culture that you're building necessarily, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's harder to get that buy-in,
Right.
then performance usually will do the trick. Right. And if some people aren't happy about it, they'll leave and you'll get new leaders in that get it. So I think it's, yeah, I mean, but again, just the point being, it's that, yeah, that's a really great idea.
Mhm.
Uh, that should be the first, if like people are, that important to our success, regardless of the department, it should be the first thing that we're talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, reading so many books and really understanding the concept of a talent centric, just environment, excuse me, environment. Because one, I think, and we all know this, but getting a chance to really speak it in terms of where it can be easily understood by other areas, that, talent acquisitions, responsibility is really everybody's job. When
Yeah.
they really look at it at the end of the day, like, yeah, I may be the leader, maybe the thought leader and such, but it's not solely just on me, because I can bring anybody to the gates. But how do we nurture that going forward? How do we create an opportunity for not only for them, but for those that come after them? So that's really what excites me about talent acquisition and just
Yeah.
being who I am. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and just like just circle back around, like why it should be the first thing on every leadership call. Like just going back to like you were talking about college football, like Alabama, right? Like there's a few things. One is obviously the coaching organization, the process, how they go about running the organization. Like, yes, but obviously the quality of the talent, right, is going to have a very high impact on the quality of the outcomes produced, right?
absolutely.
Like the amount of time that's spent on talent scouting and finding the right people and convincing the right people to join teams, whether at college level or professional, right? The amount of money that people are willing at professional level, how much money they're putting into key A players, key
Yeah,
people, because they know it's going to drive outcomes, right?
you're right.
So I'm not saying like both are important. You need A players and you need process and structure, and good coaches or VPs, right? You
Right.
need that. I'm not saying that it's like all about the talent, but come on, like when you watch professional sports, like obviously you need top talent. And in order to do that,
Definitely.
you have to make that a top priority. And you have to have good people across the board, because like you can't just hire an A player in one department, because they're not going to stay there if they're looking at the other departments or the progress of the organization. Like if you put an A player on a team that's like winning 2 games a year, like they're not obviously going to stay.
Yeah, yeah.
If they have anything to do with it, they're going to try to get traded or something like that, right? So I think it's
Absolutely.
like a direct correlation, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't know.
No, but I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And so I think that, one of the things that you mentioned was, the investment. When you talk about just the amount of investment that they put into those talent scouts, into this, like really understanding being in the homes, being in the communities as well, to ensure that they're obviously going after the right people. I think the same thing works in organizations. And so my question, and I kind of know from my experience, how do I get leadership to really invest into what I'm doing? So yes, obviously I have this whole, I can come up with, PowerPoints and all kinds of stuff for days. But how do I actually get them to invest and to invest consistently? So I think one of the things that I've done, obviously, and the environment I came in, we were like using agencies for everything. It was just giving out money, giving out money, giving out money to agents. And not saying that they weren't doing a bad job, but the problem was there was really no, we had a lot of star players, but there was no real process to say, okay, what are we doing now? How are we attracting? What are we doing? So we had a referral program. We had all these different things. And so I think one of the things that I first, even committed to is just looking at the bottom line. And it was easy because I'm like, okay, we're using contracts for this, and that. And I'm like, well, I could save us quite a bit of money from from that if you just allow me to have these resources and such. And one of the resources I asked for, which everybody, is pretty much using just LinkedIn Recruiter, just having my license and such. But just going beyond that. So even with the success that I've been blessed to have, with that already saving, the company, thousands of dollars to say the least. It certainly adds credibility to what's going on. So I think that that's also a thing too, as well as how do you continuously build that credibility again? So regardless of what audience you're talking to, whether it's C-suite, whether it's, those specific hiring managers, continuously building that credibility to ensure that, people will be receptive of you. Because again, I know TA sometimes is, we're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, when it comes to just, when it comes to these things. But, again, when as you mentioned before, when things don't go right, we hear you loud and clear. so
yeah.
But it's like go ahead.
We're in the hot seat for this stuff like all the time. It's like,
right.
Like recruiters are just constantly getting beat up for stuff that's not under our control. It's like, like holding it, like you wouldn't hold an accountable an SDR for revenue closed one.
Right. Absolutely.
You can't, I'm not comparing that sales develop or SDR is the junior function and talent acquisition isn't, but I'm just saying the parallel in terms of performance metrics being around tied to things that people can't control is never a good strategy. So of course, and there's bad recruiters out there. Don't get me wrong. There's bad recruiting managers and leaders. I get that. It's people that are, obviously relationship sales acumen, that kind of stuff is important. But if people don't understand process, they're not going to be very good. They have a ceiling, I should say. Maybe you can plug them in as a recruiter, but you need people that understand process and tech and these types of things, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think a lot of the times it's you can have good recruiters that are getting a lot of heat, and it's okay, we see that a lot too, right?
Yeah.
You see that all the time. So I just think it's important. I think we've pretty much covered the point of executive buy-in, right? Hopefully this is valuable and some people have some good takeaways. I guess the last thing I'll say is if you're not getting that buy-in and you've tried all of these things, leave. Find a company that's ready to invest in you.
And I'll say this, TA is a hot market, especially TA leadership right now. I can't tell you how many times I get hit up on, LinkedIn, a day, just hey, we have this opportunity. And I say, it wasn't like that 5 years ago. So I think that, companies are really beginning to understand, in the age of transition with talent, really just being able to call their own shots. I have a healthcare background. So I remember growing up and just kind of, being, 2010, 2015 ish, it was, because I work with clinicians a lot. So it was nursing shortages and this and that and stuff. So we would be throwing money, all kinds of this sign-on bonuses to clinicians and stuff. And so now you're seeing that for literally everywhere. If you're an engineer, you can pretty much call your own shot. If you're a developer, you can call your own shot. So it's how do you compete with the market like that? In terms of where literally everybody can say, hey, you know what, I'm not happy here, or I can just do whatever it is that, I feel would be my next move. So I think even in that, TA is a really big part of that. So I like the fact that there is this surge of just of interest, so to speak, when it comes to talent acquisition, specifically in leadership. So
yeah, for sure. Let's another thing I want to see more of is if companies are spending a ton with contingent, I want to see less of an emphasis, and it's okay to bring costs down. That's okay for that to be a goal, but hey, what if we take 75% of that contingent budget and just add it to internal TA? We'll still save a little bit, but let's not try to drop that contingent spend all the way down. Let's reallocate it, because if we invest that into employer branding and assets for candidates and process and tech and getting more recruiters. We can produce better candidate experiences.
Right.
We're going to be able to produce better hiring outcomes, get stronger talent. And so sometimes I think the conversation, it's too much focused on cost savings versus on value creation. And I think that we need to see a shift there as well.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that that's obviously, that's something that I really pride myself on. It's just like, really looking at, where we are and like where we're going and how much value that it could be increased from that, because value is a lot more sustainable than it's cutting dollars and cents. If our value increases, that's going to do wonders, even things that can't even be measured. And I think that that's also, the thing for me too, is that, while I love data, I try not to get necessarily so ingrained in it to where I forget the fact that, like, hey, there are things that go beyond data in terms of helping people be successful. So looking at it from a holistic perspective. So
right, there's a lot of things that you're not going to be able to directly tie to placements, but it's definitely having an impact. Or like number of hires isn't enough. Like there's the whole quality of hire, which is like not a metric I even really recommend tracking, because it's just like, but you know what I mean? Like there's just, there's a lot of things that they're hard to directly attribute to like data, but you know that they're important. Hey, if we're playing the long game and we're trying to get the best people on our team and we want to retain those people, there's a lot of things that we have to do.
Right.
That, yes, it's going to impact the numbers on a quarterly or annual basis, but how are we really going to like point to that number and say it's because we did this one thing? Like,
right.
I think Ben Horowitz of A to Z, the venture capital firm, wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's about scaling companies. Have you read that one? It's really,
I have not, but I'm taking a note.
Oh yeah, definitely check it out. You'll really enjoy it. It's like one of the few business books that actually captured my attention and I actually enjoyed reading. But one of the things that he talks about is basically like you don't scale a company with a magic bullet. You do it with hundreds of lead bullets. And so I've really taken that philosophy to heart, not only for scaling my business, but when I get even more tactical on a function level. It's like, is one thing going to be the thing that lifts talent acquisition? No. And that's the hard part of selling talent, the value of talent acquisition to leadership, because you want to get this one investment and they're like, okay, well, how's that going to impact our hiring outcome for the year? And it's like, well, look, it's not going to give us a significant lift, but if we do this alongside this, and this, it's going to give us overall a big lift. Like, let's say, let's say everything might give like a 1% lift. Right. I mean, and that's, again, that is something that makes it a little difficult for us to sell for additional budget in my experience, but it's just been my life experience, man, scaling businesses and like optimizing TA. It's like, let's focus on making 1,000 incremental changes over the next couple of years, opposed to just finding this magic bullet that doesn't exist. Like, you're not going to get hired.com or a new agency recruit. That's not a knock on Hired, by the way. I really like that company, but I'm going to say, like, you're not going to get like one thing in place, and that's not going to solve all your problems, is what I mean by that. Like,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I love that approach. And so typically, I like to keep bullets in the chamber, so to speak. So I'll let you know like kind of what's going on. But I think my approach, is very much similar, is the fact that anytime I ask for something and I get it and I win because of that thing, again, that just adds credibility. And I know that that's not the complete picture. And I think that that's kind of like that snowball effect. Every time I ask for something and I'm winning because of that one thing, then it increases my chances of obviously me getting, whatever else I need that I believe will be beneficial for TA, because I've been successful doing like the small things as well. Because even when I first started, I was using Recruiter Lite at just for LinkedIn. Have you ever used Recruiter Lite before? I mean, it is.
Fortunately not.
Okay, but I say it is rough. It is compared, because I'm so used to having like obviously the big LinkedIn license and stuff. So like using that, but I was actually able to actually get 2 hires from using like the light version.
Nice.
And
grinding it out.
Basically. And so when you're pitching to a company that doesn't really understand, like they understand TA, but don't really understand TA. So I had to kind of just really just get them involved and say, okay, give me this. I'll show you what this can do. And then I know I'm going to need this, but just give me that opportunity. So it just really creates a lot of momentum, upward momentum, because you have success with those small those small investments and such. And so you can always ask for the loaf of bread a slice at a time, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you can find a way to get some early wins, like if you're going
Yeah.
into an environment that doesn't have a ton of budget,
Right.
or
And
a
that's
lot
the
of
thing.
resources.
Yeah. Celebrate those wins. Cause I'm telling you right now, and luckily I don't have to be, always toot my own horn all the time, but you best
You
believe.
have to, man.
Yeah, but
Like,
I'm not gonna say like it's just me, but
yeah.
I got people that are around me. But certainly, I'm definitely gonna be blasting. Like, I'm always blasting. Like, hey, this is what we did. We did it with this. You're welcome. So,
yeah, for sure, man. I agree. It's like, I think that's just some good career advice in general. Like, when you have wins, you have to share it with the team, because you might think it's obvious or that everybody noticed, but everybody else has got like 1,000 other things going on. So like sharing your wins is really important.
Right.
So well, hey, look, this has been a lot of fun. We're coming up on time here.
Yeah.
So yeah, David, I just want to say thanks for joining us today. This was great. And for people that want to engage with you, might want to follow you on LinkedIn, like, or wherever else. Like, where are you online, and how can people engage with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn, David Marshall, hyphen Sherm, or I guess David Marshall, Sherm CP. I got the same smile, same glass, well, not same glasses, but you'll see me, trust me, you'll know it's me. Also I'm on Twitter, King David _1. Don't judge me by that name. So also same thing on Instagram. But I just love, I love, just to be involved in community engagement events and such. So I'm a board member for BSHRM currently. So I serve as vice president of membership. So BSHRM is Birmingham Society of Human Resources. So it's like SHRM, but just the Birmingham chapter. Cool. I just, those are the best ways to find me, or just, connect with me. But I'm always happy to connect and just connect people with opportunities. So really excited.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, James, for having me, man. This has been a great conversation. I love what you're doing. I think I love the unique concept of your business, but just also your insights too, as well. So those performance metrics, I'm definitely going to, I'm plugging some of that in.
Just make sure they come from the CEO, not you. Otherwise, you're going to get some nasty looks on your next Zoom call, man.
Indeed.
For sure. Well, anyways, man, this was a lot of fun. So thank you. And for everybody tuning in, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.